Hello, everybody. My name is Mark. Thank you very much for your hospitality on this long weekend, just ahead of your long weekend. I was just saying it's great to see some new faces. I come from the Joburg financial media scene, and I've been around doing financial journalism for the last 10 years. The title of my presentation, because when I saw that I was going to be talking about financial statements, I kind of panicked and thought, I'm not sure we get anybody here on a Friday to talk about financial statements. So I changed it up a little bit, and I said how I think media works and what you can get out of it. We will look in some of the aspects of the financial media statements and financial statements, but I'm going to try and unpack it in such a way that I, as a layperson, would understand it and how we can then make it fit into the things that financial journalists do on a day-to-day basis. I kind of have a couple of rules when I do these presentations. Number one reads, there are no gurus. The whole thing about doing these presentations is a bi-directional communication. I'm not here to talk at you. I went to school once for a period of time, and I didn't enjoy being spoken at indefinitely. I came there so that I could learn something, and hopefully you guys will learn something out of this by asking me questions and creating a two-way conversation. I love journalism. If I could pick any career in the world as a 20-year-old, I would do journalism. I think it's the only career where you have the amazing access to people. And I think, when you often say to people that I work in journalism, they kind of give you a bit of a skew look, saying, is that the best you could do with your job? You could be in PR, you could be in communications, you could be a CA, and why would you go into journalism? And for me, it's all about the amazing people you get to meet. You have access to anybody. And I know that when I started financial journalism, I was on the job for 2 days. I knew nothing about covering insurers. And I got dragged into a lunch with Keith Kennedy, who ran Mutual and Federal in South Africa, which is a short-term insurer. And I sat down with Keith, and I have no idea how to start a conversation with a guy who is clearly 40 years older than me. We're having lunch, and we have this awkward discussion where he's trying to tell me about what Mutual and Federal does, and I have absolutely no idea what he's saying. And eventually we say, okay, we'll just stop talking about numbers for a moment. Just tell me who it is. What is your kind of passion around insurance? How did you get there? And you kind of meet in the middle, but I just think it's that job where I can be a 20-something with no network at all, and I can go and meet somebody who runs one of the biggest companies in South Africa. You can go and find a CEO of a bank, and he will take your call. There is no other job in South Africa, anywhere, that'll give you that access. And if you don't know what you want to do with your life, start in journalism, because it will give you access to passionate people who are passionate about a whole lot of different things. When you look at the media world, and I think there's some research that came out of the US, it said 80% of what you read in media today is generated by the PR or IR industries, investor relations industries. And that kind of gives this idea that what we do is simply being a service taker. We simply distribute what other people tell us is happening. And I think that becomes almost like this incessant thing in the value chain where I'm just going to throw stuff at journalists and that we're simply going to churn out whatever it is that the PR, IR, communications firms simply want you to be. And then they say, well, what value do you actually add? And I think my starting point with this presentation is that you add enormous value. And I think we often forget just how powerful the media really is. We hear about the demise of media, all the newsrooms get cut, etc. South Africa is a perfect example right now of the strength of media. The stuff in Kandla, your SOEs, corporate greed, that's not stuff that's been created by any PR, IR firm anywhere in the world. It's been created by people who are passionate about what they do. This idea that they can go and take the idea of democracy, sharing information, and passing it to a broader public. So I think my first thing is be proud of being a journalist. There's nothing better than the job that you're doing at the moment. My second thing is I'm here to learn from you as much as you're here to learn from me. Please try and connect with me. I'm one person. I have some insights. I have some ideas about how media works. But like I said, I don't want to sit here and just talk in one direction. I would love to hear from you in terms of what matters to you and what you think we do wrong. Media is under constant threat, whether it's regulatory, whether it is commercial. We need to work together. And I think that if you look in South Africa at the moment, a lot of the investigative journalism is actually being funded because People are combining their resources. They're working with the legal houses, they're working with different media houses, and they're getting the stories out there. It doesn't have to be trench coats and in the rain. It's just a case of what business models are working. How can we go and grow the industry to be able to empower everybody that's involved? Your network is your net worth. It's a little bit cheesy, but it is true. The people that you know will help you in this game. Access to people. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, email, etc. Those are my details there, and I'll share them again at the end. I do try and communicate with as many people as possible because I think that is growing my network. If you just pop me a mail, we've got, I don't know how much of you guys look at the data services that we have, but we have a paid-for data service which includes everything from financial statements, share prices, sends announcements, etc. If you pop me a mail, I'll give you free access to that stuff. It just, for me, means that I know that once I've stood up here in front of you, you've seen something that I've been able to add to what you guys do. So please pop me a mail and connect. So trends that are shaping media at the moment. And the simple answer, the first one is robots are coming for your job. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the reason I put that there is Glenn Osmond used to run One Time in South Africa. And he said the thing about dealing with financial journalists is that it's become so easy. All we do is we create a press release. We put all the good news at the top. We tell you our profits are this, our revenue is that. And we just gradually hide the rest of the news at the bottom. And most journalists will simply regurgitate what they read at the top, pass it through to the bottom, and ignore whatever goes. You know, if you've done newspaper editing, for instance, it's the idea of the funnel, chop it off from the bottom, most important stuff at the top. And most PRs and IRs are very aware of this. So all they do is they put the best information at the top, the not so great stuff at the bottom, and most people swallow it hook, line, and sinker. And I say that because a lot of the, Associated Press, Washington Post, etc., they've got bots and AI that are busy writing those kind of stories for you at the moment. They're busy writing headline earnings per share went up, earnings per share did this, revenue did that. It's all automated now. But you can add a hell of a lot more value than going and simply reporting the numbers that are at the top of a press release. Clients are becoming your competitors. And I find this like one of the most interesting dynamics in media at the moment and I think it's also one of the really interesting opportunities because a lot of people come to the idea that media is simply your outlets for your newspaper, your radio, etc. There are things like podcasts that are inside. The IR firms are now doing podcasting. They got live streaming of financial results. These things are becoming increasingly important for the industry as a whole to say, well, it's not just traditional media, it is all the other parts that combine into it. And you need to be able to say, how do I service that value chain? I just thought this was a really interesting stat because it also makes us think a lot about the role of digital media. It says total digital ad spend grew another 20% in 2015 to about 60 billion, a higher growth rate than in 2013 and 2014. But 65% of it was swallowed up by 5 tech companies. Media companies are becoming tech companies, so you think of your Facebook, your Google, etc., etc. But I actually think it's a golden age of content production at the moment. You look at businesses like Netflix. Netflix is spending, I think it's the equivalent of 60 billion rand to create new content. You say, okay, well, what does that mean for me? So what? They're creating movies. We as a media house are busy doing a documentary on the Zamazamas in South Africa, with the specific intention to go and sell that to Netflix. That long-form documentary style, that long-form journalism that in a lot of ways has died, is actually an opportunity for us. And we can say, well, how do we plug into that? Now, it's very difficult to make Bidvest Namibia's financial results into a long-form documentary that we're going to sell to Netflix. But I mean, I can do it if anyone's got some budget for me. But it's, you are able to go and put these stories together and go and tell the story of how, of economic events that are going to be very important in the industry. Niche trumps noise. I look in South Africa at the moment, and if you look in the media, the business media space, you've got 3 major players in it. You've got MediaFin24, which is part of the Media24 stable. They do about 1.5 million unique visitors a month. Then you've got Business Day, which is doing about 700,000 to 800,000 a month. We do 400,000 a month as a media house. Now, what's really interesting about that is the way that those different organizations go about gathering media. So News 24, Fin 24 don't actually employ much in the way of journalists. They've got a couple of freelancers, but everything else is aggregated from the other 24.com publications. And their goal is to drive traffic through low quality, and I say that with a pinch of salt, content, because they're looking for, I worked at Fin 24 as part of the build-up for that. And the strategy there was to go and write about things like your petrol price increase, go and write about bank charges, go and write about BEE. You knew that you were going to get a hell of a lot of traffic, but not necessarily the best quality traffic. Business Day, on the other hand, invested very strongly in their political economy and their analysis of what's happening in South Africa at the moment. And in that, there's obviously a kind of push down to things like your company reporting. MoneyWeb has always traditionally looked after its the investment space. So we do about 400,000 people. We also have some radio assets, which I'll talk about in a minute, but we effectively look at the personal finance and investing side of things. People spend more time on our site than on either of those other two publications. They use our data tools because we're enriching their experience as a viewer. So they're not coming there and just saying, well, we used the example earlier, in fact, of executive remuneration. Now, it's great to be able to talk about executive remuneration, and I think we had it our best. The best read story this week was Standard Bank CEOs earned 89 million rand last year. That's great, but if we can write those populist things until the cows come home. One, it's not going to change how much money Standard Bank pays to their executives. It doesn't matter how much outrage there is through that form of writing. But we've also got this idea that we want to be able to interrogate and understand exactly how that was put together. Whereas different media houses will focus on this idea, well, I just want to pump a whole lot of stuff at you and I want you to try and be as outraged as possible and try and evoke some kind of short-term readership. And that's the problem with a lot of the digital media companies, is they're not really interrogating a lot of the assets that are there or the stories that are being put to them. And media is a fantastic data gathering tool as well. I mean, there's a very, if you, I don't know, does anyone know the Nieman Labs site? NIEMANS Labs. They kind of track media trends, and this week they've actually got a story about the 4 different bots that Washington Post are actually using to track everything from sentiment, how well a particular story is going to do. If you're interested in that digital media space, go and have a look at it. It's really some really interesting tools there.